I could keep going. I could keep going, but I won't. We're going to revisit that later on. What a fun track that is. Folks, how you doing? My name's Nick Jennison. Welcome to the Monday Guitar Show. We're doing the thing that we do on Mondays, which is hang out and chat about the guitar. And today, we are continuing our discussion on chord progressions. And for that, I thought I'd bust out a track with quite a challenging chord progression. The track is, of course, available on the Lick Library website. Remember, these streams are brought to you by Lick Library and, of course, Guitar Interactive. Go to licklibrary.com for news, reviews, wrong way around. licklibrary.com for lessons, more lessons than you can shake a lessony thing at, and guitarinteractivemagazine.com for news, reviews, interviews, all the rest of the stuff that's not lessons. And it's a really fun track if you want to play over it. There are some real challenging changes going on there, especially for a rock track, especially that Alex Lifeson F-sharp chord, as we'll get to. Now, the subject of today's stream is going to be on some essential progressions that you need to know, right? Essential progressions that you need to have in your vocabulary. This will enable you to do a few things. It's going to enable you to respond to these progressions when they arise in songs that you're learning. Maybe perhaps you're jamming with folks, and excuse me, I'm going to cough. I beg your pardon. It'll allow you to respond to that when these arise and you're playing, but also it will enable you to learn songs quicker. It'll enable you to do things like compose more interesting songs, all that sort of stuff. And we're going to get all into that in a second. But before we do, I want to remind you, if you're new here, that we do this every Monday. We hang out, we chat about the guitar, either from my studio or from the Lick Library studio down in London. It's usually down in my studio, which, I'll be honest, I like being in my little studio because I'm surrounded by beautiful amplifiers, and what a nice problem to have. Today, we are playing through, which direction is it? This direction. This guy. This is the Victory Super Sheriff, which you can't see because it's all blacked out because of the lighting. Maybe I need to get more light on the amps. We'll figure that out. The Super Sheriff is an absolute beauty. It's my favorite amp now that the Super Kraken is in for repairs. You guys know I like the Super Kraken. It's making some funny noises. So it's in getting serviced, and the Super Sheriff is a fabulous second choice in my opinion. But I've got no shortage of delicious amps to play through, including the Sheriff, what is it? The Sheriff 44, which is the older version of the Sheriff, and it sounds thus. Pretty sounding amp, really, really bonny. So we've got some Sheriff love going on today. I've also been doing some gigs at a few local schools that we do in South Tyneside. Most of this was playing acoustic, so I've got acoustic hands today, which is why I've grabbed this guitar. This guitar is set up a little heavier than my usual PRS setup, and it's nice to play when you've got grabby fingers. Anyway, I digress. While we're talking about guitars, I'd like to know from you guys which guitar you're playing today, because there are lots of very cool guitars in the chat. We're going to highlight a few of those in just a second. But before we do, let's say hello to the chat and see how everyone's getting on. We're going to say as many hellos as we can. First person through the door is our friend Marcin, who is playing his Custom 24 in the exact same color as this, he believes. Now, it's a beautiful color. I can't remember exactly what this color is called. I think it's something like gold burst or something like that, but it's a really cool color, man. If that's the color you got, you picked wisely, I think. PJ says, good evening, Nick and everyone on GI. Welcome. Good to have you. Larry Warren is here. Sacred Godslayer is tuning in. Response Audio is here, as is Kate Strange. Timothy Appling is tuning in. He's going over last week's lesson he missed before today's live stream. Excellent. Okay, there's some good stuff in there, but I think you'll get a lot out of today as well. Cranker Tom is tuning in from nearly the Algarve. Portugal's beautiful. He's got his Travel Axe and his Spark Go. Love a bit of that. I've got my Spark Mini kicking around down here. Another Spark product that I'll tell you about another time. This is my little long-suffering Spark Mini. The handles come off. This has been all around the world with me. It is my go-to practice amp, although, gotta tell you, lately, I've been having a lot of fun with plugins. Now, I'm not really a plugin guy. I'm lucky to have amps, so I use amps. But I've been having a lot of fun practicing with Archetype Rabea, which is basically a Super Kraken, so it's my favorite plugin thus far. But I do like a little bit of Spark. Who else do we have? Helmet Straps here. Kim, the big boss, is tuning in. Franz is here. PJ is here. Vil S is tuning in, as is Mike Seedorf. He's playing his Desert Yellow 1989 gem in the literal and figurative sense. Once again, whenever we talk about Ibanez, I will get my RG fixed one day. I'll sort that out. It's on the list. It's on the list. Next on the list for me, actually, as far as guitar repairs go, or guitar mods go, is I really want to get my Silver Sky refretted with huge fret wire, because the fret wire is the original 2018 spec fret wire. Now, I don't know if you guys know, but the Silver Sky spec changed about a year into production. So there is the early first spec Silver Sky, which has darker pickups, and which I love. I like the older pickups, but it has very small fret wire on the older models, which this one's got. The new models have bigger frets. I'd like to go bigger again. They're getting pretty worn, so maybe I'll get that done. Don't come at me, PRS, but I'm also debating maybe having a gentle compound radius put in, but we'll figure that out. But yeah, I'll get my Ibanez fixed, I promise. Ergo Hog's tuning in. He's got two guitars next to him. He's got a Gem 70V, very cool, freshly strung, and an RG 550 Genesis. Oh man, you got some beautiful guitars. Our friend Paul Barnett's tuning in as his Kathmandu 1962 with his gold top. My friend James, big strong James from the gym, is tuning in. Lovely to see you. Ergo Hog says some lovely outside notes there. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Our friend Paul Dreams is playing. Hi all. He's playing his Fender Vintera 50 Strat. Cool choice. Love a bit of that. My friend Rob's tuning in. Don't forget to go check out Rob's band Mad Monday. Great band. You'll like them. Mal Riley is here. Steve Louth, who I keep pronouncing wrong, is in the house. I'm pronouncing it both ways to hedge my bets. Mal Riley's here playing a JS 1000. I have an JS 1000. Very cool. PJ's got PRS Piezo too. Now, I'm jealous about that because I fancy a Piezo guitar. Piezo, however you pronounce it. I don't know. But I fancy one. So maybe I'll get, I don't know. Decisions. Anyway, Punk Rocket is tuning in. Great username. Love a bit of that. Marcin, oh, he's talking about his lovely PRS. He's posting it on his Instagram. Bobby Martin's here playing a Fender Tele. Raphael O'Hafael's playing a Snakebite Black without the eye in the 12th, made in Korea. Very cool. Very cool guitar. We've got an SG Supreme in ebony. Beautiful. Steve Ford's here. Who else do we have? I beg your pardon. Make sure I don't miss anybody. Johnny D's tuning in, playing his Baja Telly. Very cool. Love a bit of that. My friend Nick Harrison's tuning in. Who else do we have? Four Cornish is here. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's everyone. So let's get into the meat of today's stream. Last week, we discussed chord construction, which is a super valuable skill. Incredibly valuable, because if we don't understand chord construction, we don't have much hope of understanding chord progressions. Now, there is some argument over the term chord progression, and we talked about this last week, and we'll define our terms here, but a chord progression in pop, as far as I'm concerned, is simply a series of chords that run together. Now, I have heard from some jazz and fusion musicians that a chord progression is only a progression if it applies functional harmony, i.e. Quintal harmony, where we move from 2 to 5 to 1, etc. And if it doesn't apply those rules, it is a chord sequence. For me, I think that is a canard, a little like the descending form of the melodic minor. I think in some cases, fair enough, but I think it's something that in pop, rock, most styles of music, we can call it a progression. So chord progressions, just moving that out the way in case anybody is a fusion person in the chat or a functional harmony person in the chat and wants to come at me. Our definition for today is a series of chords that are strung together, let's say. Now, usually a repeating one as well, I should point out. So we're going to begin also by defining some terms in terms of how we're going to refer to our chords. And this is a system that we refer to as the Nashville numbering system. Now, the Nashville numbers, yes, there is some difference in terms of definitions, but ultimately what I think of when I think of the Nashville numbers and when I think of the chord progression numbering system is numbering our chords as they relate to the major scale. The major scale. What I mean by that is if we play up the low E string, we have E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E to produce the E major scale. We can think of this as a sequence running root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and root once again. And you can also think about this as being a sequence of a tone interval, that's 2 frets, a tone interval, a semitone interval between 3 and 4, another tone interval, another tone interval, 2 frets, another tones interval, and then finally a semitone between 7 and root. Now each one of these chords has a value attached to it, and depending upon how we string these chords together, that will determine its values. Now typically in the major scale we have the following chords. On 1 we have a major chord. On 2 and 3 we have minor chords, which can become minor 7 chords. On 4 and 5 we have major chords, which can become a major 7 chord and a dominant 7 chord on 5. 5 is typically a dominant 7. Finally, on 6 we have another minor chord becoming minor 7. Sounds like the shipping forecast. And then last but not least we have a diminished triad on chord number, chord number 7, which becomes a minor 7 flat 5. I'll do that once again. In triads, it's major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. In sevens, it is major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, and then minor 7 flat 5. If we choose to include the 7s, that's our terms. So this is the fundamental assumptions that we're working from. Now, let's talk about the most common chord progression in modern music and some various iterations of it. It is not the 2-5-1, it is not the 12-bar blues, it is the near ubiquitous 1-5-6-4. It's the journey chord progression. It's this chord progression. Yikes. 1-5-6-4. 1-5-6-4. What does that mean? It means from our major scale, we play chord 1, which in this case is E, chord 5, which is B, chord 6, which is C sharp minor, and chord 4, which is A major. Don't worry if you're a bit ahead of this in terms of the textbook. We will get more complex than this. This is just a little jumping off point for folks. So 1, 5, 6, 4. We can play this in any key and it will be the same. So if you have a chord progression that reads G, D, E minor, C, like When I Come Around, it's that. It's that. Similarly, if you have a chord progression that reads D, A, B minor, G, it is the same. Now these chord progressions have the same intervals in them. So regardless of where we start the chord progression, whether we started on a G, whether we started on an E, whether we started on a D, whether we started on a B flat, whatever, it will always produce the same musical outcome. And here is why it's so nice. Here's my favorite, one of my favorite things about it, is this chord progression is a masterful example of the central point of all music, which is the balancing of tense sounds or unstable sounds that we don't want to hang out on versus stable sounds or relaxed sounds, or whatever you want to call them, stable, resolved sounds, whatever, sounds that we do want to hang out on. And check this out. So if we play this chord progression, if we play 1, it's very stable. 5 is almost maximally unstable as far as this chord progression goes. It's about as unstable gets. We really don't want to hang out there. We want to move somewhere else. This C sharp minor is actually quite stable. And then this chord, the 4 chord, the A, kind of unstable. So we get this. Stable, we can hang out there. Unstable, we want to move. Stable, we can stay here. Unstable, we want to move. Let me demonstrate this by resolving on one of the unstable chords. I can feel myself twitching. Can you feel the same? It should feel like you just desperately want to go like that to finish things off. Let's resolve on another one of the stable chords. Let's resolve on C sharp minor to show you what I'm talking about. We can hang out in there all day. That feels like a nice place to finish. Hopefully you get the gist here. This is the beauty of this chord progression, is that it balances a stable sound with an unstable sound, a stable sound with an unstable sound. And this is why it's so good. Now, it is very cliche. This is very cliche. Please don't write songs with this progression unless it's the only one you can think of that'll fit, right? Because, I mean, who am I to tell you? Write whatever songs you want. But, you know, I try and avoid this progression in my own writing for that reason, because there are literally millions of songs, certainly in the last 40 years, that have used this progression. Also, as a friend Nick Harrison has rightly pointed out, you can flip it on its head and get all manner of other songs by starting on a different chord. And we're going to get to that in a second. It is literally hundreds of chords. Now, here is an interesting phenomenon with this. If we take a look at the constituent notes of this chord progression, let's do it in the key of E, we can create some, we can draw some inferences about how we might play over this in terms of playing melodies. So we could play the 1 chord as E, B, and G sharp. That would work. We could play the 5 chord as B, D sharp, F sharp. Notice that the 5 note is common to the 1 chord and the 5 chord, but the other 2 notes change. So we could phrase like this. Or if we're soloing, we could hit the 5 over both of those notes, both of those chords, and have it work just fine. Over the C sharp, things change a little bit. If we compare that to the 5 chord, literally everything changes. This B, D sharp, F sharp changes to C sharp, F, I beg your pardon, I'll say that again. So this B, D sharp, F sharp changes to C sharp, E, G sharp. Well, everything changes. But this chord, this C sharp, is very closely related to the 1 chord, which is why they both sound quite stable. So there's a big tonal jump from here to here. So you could argue that this is a jump of 2, i.e. 2 notes change, and this is a jump of 3 notes change. But then when we get to this, which is a 4 chord, only 1 note changes. And then returning to the 1 chord, 2 notes change. That's one of the reasons why this is so interesting. Now, if we were phrasing over this chord progression, we could play it a few different ways. If we were playing on the 3rd, we could play this, which works just fine. Oops, I'll play it again. That's quite a pleasant way to phrase through that. And understanding this chord progression and its dynamics are crucial to this. Now, this is not the only iteration of this chord progression that we can play. We can play a few others. We can play the same thing, but starting in a different place. So the variations upon this would be, instead of playing 1, 5, 6, 4, we could play the most obvious one, which instead of doing 1, 5, 6, 4, we do 6, 4, 1, 5, which is the minor version. And it sounds like this. 6, 4, 1, 5. But make no mistake, this is the same chord progression. It feels like C sharp minor, because we've elected to resolve on this C sharp, but it is the same chord progression with the same function. It's 1,000 songs. We've had a few suggestions in the comments already. For me, it always sounds like It's My Life by Bon Jovi. With a little cheeky move in there, but it's the same thing. Now, we can start this on a few other places too. We don't just have to start it on the 1 chord or the 6 chord. We could start it on one of the unresolved chords. Let's see, for example, what happens when we start on the 4 chord, which would give us 4, 1, 5, 6. Surprisingly effective. So we'll go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that has a very different feel, despite basically being the same chord progression. We just started on the 4 chord. Now let's do the same thing, but let's start on the 5 chord, which gives us 5, 6, 4, 1. This is interesting. These variations that start on the 5 chord disrupt this flow, or start on an unstable chord, disrupt this flow of stable, unstable, stable, unstable. So it feels different. We start with unstable, which sets up expectation, and then we resolve it. And then we take that stability away, and then we resolve it. It feels very different. And this is, again, quite a potent songwriting tactic, depending upon how you want the chord progression to sound. And the melodies, well, they can stay quite similar, to be honest. Now, let's try that version starting on the 5 chord. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I digress. Sorry, I'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got to get off that chord. There we go. And that is, again, something you will have heard many, many, many times. It's the same chord progression. It is the same chord progression. This happens so often it hurts. It's ridiculous. Now, that's only if we do it in order, but we can also do it in reverse order. In reverse order. The reverse order is, instead of going 1, 5, 6, 4, we go 4, 6, 5, 1. Now this is the Mr. Brightside chord progression, which is where we go 1, 4, 6, 5. Now that feels like a different progression, but if you follow me through here, right, I'm going to write this on screen so we can see what's going on. Give me a quick second and I'll make a little note on the screen for you guys. Let's go. Where are we? 1, 4, sorry, I digress. Backwards. I keep saying I digress. 4, 6, 5, 1. This is the backwards version of this chord progression. That is the retrograde version. But if you started with, I'll say it again, 4, 6, have I got that right? 4, 6, 5, 1, 1, 5, 6, 4. Yes, that's correct. So if you start on the 1 chord here, right, the 1 chord, which is this one. Let me see if I can do this. 1, 5, 4, sorry, 6, 5. 1, 4, 6, 5. It's Mr. Brightside, which is this. My favourite example of this is the song Drives Me Crazy by Fine Young Cannibals, which is that it's actually in D. You can sing She Drives Me Crazy to that, and it's this. It's the same chord progression, just played in reverse. Now, if we do this version, which is 4, 6, 5, 1, that's quite good fun too. 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't have quite the same gravity as the previous version, but you can see how this works. This is ultimately the same chord progression. The same chord progression. Now, we've got some very cool comments coming in. My friend Peter Dyers, wonderful guitar player, is saying secondary dominance next. We're going to get there, my man. We're going to get there, my man. I promise. May not be today, but we'll get there. But we've got another stream on this. Now, that is the 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression. It is the chord progression, which leads me to another version of the chord progression. Because if you ask musicians, different musicians playing different genres will give you different versions of the chord progression. You ask them what the chord progression is, you get a different take, whether you ask a pop musician, a jazz musician, a blues musician, a classical musician. Who knows? It's just 1s and 5s for the most part. I digress. I'm doing our classical friends dirty. But you get the drill. Now, the most common chord progression in le jazz is 2, 5, 1. Same chords, but we're playing 2, then we're playing 5, then we're playing 1. Gives us this. 2, 5, 1. You can almost smell the jazz, and that was the least jazzy way to play it. 2, 5, 1. We could play 2, 5, 1. Very pretty. This is the same chord progression. Well, it's not the same chord progression, but the same chord progression is another interesting one I'll show you in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm looking at my notes and I'm one ahead from where I should be. Now, this is a little chord unit that we find all over the place. You'll be amazed how often you find these little 2-5-1s, depending upon where you are looking for them. So let's take an example of 2-5-1s played in sequence. We can play a 2-5-1 in a variety of keys. We could play a 2-5-1 in E, a 2-5-1 in D, and a 2-5-1 in C to obtain this. And all manner of other progressions that we can throw this beautiful chord sequence at, but this chord progression extends out. Now, this is an example of what we talked about before as functional harmony, which is where I'm going to really gloss over functional harmony here, so please don't come at me, functional harmony nerds. In this instance, functional harmony we will think of as harmony that moves in fifths, i.e., every time we play a chord, like 2, we move a fifth away. In this case, we move a fifth away downwards. So we go down a fifth from 2 to 5, 5 going down to 1. Now we can extend this out all the way through our major scale. So a very common example of this is the extended version, which is the 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Same thing. If we're playing in E, it's G sharp minor, C sharp minor, F sharp minor, B dominant 7, C, it can get my letters wrong, E major 7. Once again, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Very pretty. Now, this can go further. We don't have to just do 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. We could also take the 3 and we could extend that out once again to get the 7, for example, which is 3, 7, and that can extend back to 4. So we could play 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And on and on and on she goes. We can do the same thing through our minor harmony, where we might get this is an example of what we might refer to as functional harmony. We are going to gloss over functional harmony a little bit because I also want to introduce you to another wonderful oldie worldy chord progression, a chord progression that moves in a similar fashion to the 2-5-1. Now the 2-5-1, the wonderful thing about it is, unlike the 3-6-2, too many numbers, unlike the 1-5-6-4, the 4 chords of the apocalypse, unlike that chord progression, the 2-5-1 doesn't go stable, unstable, stable, unstable, stable, unstable. What it does is it goes quite unstable, very unstable, stable. Quite unstable, very unstable, stable. Like this. Quite unstable, very unstable, stable. Quite unstable, very unstable, stable. Which has an analog in pop music. And this analog is the 1-4-5. The 1-4-5 being this progression. You might think about this as the Wild Thing progression. Now you may be saying to me, but Nick, that's different chords. This is 1, 4, and 5. You played 2, 5, and 1 before. It's not the same thing. Well, what if we change the order? What if instead of playing 1, 4, 5, we play 4, 5, 1? So we can have this. 4, 5, 1. That is a less expensive version of the 2-5-1. Here's why. It goes something, 5, 1. The something is an A major in this case. An A major is one note removed from an F sharp minor. If you plug this note into your A major, it becomes the 2. 2 and 4 are so close to each other it hurts. They don't really have that much between them. So you could consider a 4, 5, 1 and a 2, 5, 1 to be the same thing, but with a slightly different accent, if that makes sense. It's an interesting beast for sure. Now, the 1-4-5 is one of our most common chord progressions. We're going to get to that. Here is a very cool one here. Very, very cool. I'll point this out, by the way. The song Wicked Game is A major, E major, B minor. We'll get to that. That's a really interesting one. That's an example of a modal chord progression. I'm going to say the words, right? Because people have said, and I'll die on this hill. People have said that you can't have a modal chord progression because it doesn't exhibit functional harmony. You can only have a chord sequence, to which I say semantics. Anyway, we all know what we mean. So yeah, it's a modal chord progression in the key, and yes, you can have things in the key of B Dorian. In this case, the notes are chosen from A major. Yes, that's the collection, that's the pool. I'm ranting at somebody specific here, a piano player I know. Anyway, I digress. B Dorian, you'd refer to it as. So we'll get to why in a moment, because there are some lovely tells about the Dorian that we'll get to. But our 1-4-5, I want to quickly backtrack to the 2-5-1. So the 2-5-1 is another interesting beast because we hear 2-5-1s, all over the place, and we also hear them tucked in other chord progressions. So sometimes you'll hear something like this, where you might be playing something in E major, and maybe you have the good old trappings of E major exactly as it stands, this 4 chords of the apocalypse, and you may find some interesting little move where maybe we take a little side step to get to this A. We might play something like this to get to the A. This is very common. A lot of my students like this sort of stuff in styles of music like city pop, for example. Something I am only dimly aware of as an old man who likes blues. Craig has pointed out, I digress. It's my new catchphrase, man, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on with it, right? I need to stop saying that, so I'm going to stop saying that now. I will say no more. No more I digress, because catchphrases, I can't help it, man. Anyway, okay, so this 2-5-1. This is an example of what that sounds like if we're playing in E, but we decide to employ a 2-5-1 to lead us to A. Now, the crucial thing here is I'm not playing 2-5-1 in E. I'm playing 2-5-1 in the chord, going to the key of the chord that I'm leading to. So it would be a 2-5-1 in A, which would be B minor, some kind of E dominant, and then A major. So we might get this. Very pretty little chord progression. I'll go again. Let me get that once again. That is an example of a little 2-5-1 snuck in the middle of another chord progression. But when you hear this, that movement, we can recognize that instantly as 2-5-1. And so it goes. We can do the same thing with a minor 2-5-1. If we wanted to get to our C sharp, we can play this little chord progression, which is the 2 of C, the 2 of C sharp, the 5 of C sharp, and then our C sharp minor as the temporary 1, which would give us this. Let me get this right. What an interesting way to skin this chord progression. But make no mistake, it is still that chord progression. It is still the same chord progression. Now, moving on. We've talked about 1/4s and 5s, right? 1/4-5s. 1/4-5 leads us to another chord progression that we must know, which is the 12-bar blues. The 12-bar blues is a chord progression that is centered around the 1, 4, and 5, with a difference. Now, this is where Peter's question starts to come in, which is the secondary dominant. Now, secondary dominant means a few things. It means one thing in the context of functional harmony, but it also means another thing in the context of some other styles of music, specifically things like blues, where we take a chord progression like this: 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. And we make all the chords dominant, whether they were meant to be dominant or not. Now, in its most basic form, the 12-bar blues is this. We play 4 bars of 1 chord, 2 bars of 4 chord, all dominant, 2 bars of 1 chord, 2 bars of 5 chord, 2 bars of 1 chord. That's the most basic version. 3, 4, bar 5, 2 bars of this, bar 6, bar 7, bar 8, bar 9 we go here, and bar 11 and 12 are back down here. Basically no one plays it that way because it's quite dull. So what we find is people will start doing stuff with the back end. And the back end of our 12-bar blues is most commonly expressed as 5, 4, 1, 5 again. So we get this: 1, 4, 1. Then bar each of 5, 4, and 1, 5 again. And now we're playing Ice Cream Man. And on with the big solo, which I never got around to learning. I learned most of the solos from Van Halen 1. That is not one of them. Maybe I need to learn that one day because it's a very cool solo. Anyway, that is the basics of the 12-bar blues, but there is way more to it than that. There is tons of stuff we can do with the 12-bar. One of the most common ones is what we might call a quick change 12-bar. And a quick change 12-bar is something that you need to be aware of as a musician, because the quick change 12-bar will happen fairly regular. All it is when we take a 12-bar blues and we put a 4 chord on bar number 2. That is the quick change. So we get this. We get a 1, 4, 1, 4, a 1, a 5, 4, 1, 5 again, 1, 4, a 1. You get the drill. We've all heard it 1,000 times. Now, maybe not with that jaunty little thing. We could play it like this. Which is a little more of a familiar way of playing it. There's all sorts of other ways you could play it. You could play it straight, like a Texas thing, where you go maybe something like this, or with a quick change. And there are all manner of variations you can do within. You don't have to do the 5 at the end. You don't have to do the 5, 4. So many ways you can skin this. The other one we need to be aware of is the minor form of our 12-bar blues. The minor form of the 12-bar blues is the same thing, but rather than deriving its chords from the major scale, this is leading me to the Iron Maiden thing, by the way, we derive the chords from the appropriate minor scale. Now, an easy way to think about this, if you want to know kind of where these chords come from, is take your 6th chord, which is this, and reassign that to be 1. So if you want E minor, you would take that E minor and you could imagine it as the 6 of some kind of major scale. So 6, 7, 1. You could take the chords of G major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put that 6 as the 1, and now we have 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. They have the same qualities as they would be if they were derived from G major. So 1 in the minor key is E minor, 2 is half diminished, 3 is major 7, minor 7, minor 7 sometimes still dominant 7. More on that later. Flat 6, major 7, flat 7, dominant, but almost nobody plays it as dominant because it sounds a bit ugly. Minor. Now, the minor 12 bar is as follows. It's the same chords, but just with this as its central pool of notes. So we have E minor. Now, this is where things get a bit weird, because we can play B minor, A minor. But it's not that common. What we tend to play instead is this. There's our 4 chord. Instead of playing 5 and 4, we play flat 6 dominant, 5 dominant, 1. And we make the 5 dominant both times, even though it's not dominant in the minor scale. What gives? Why do we do this? Well, this is one of these just weird quirks, because 5 as a dominant chord sounds so friggin' cool, right? It sounds so blimmin' cool going to here that we almost always play it because it's cool. It's very rare that we actually hit that. Sounds kind of lame. So we can assume if we play a 5 chord, even if it's in the minor key, probably dominant. Which leads me to another chord progression, and this is the final one of the chord progressions, which is this. It's the 1, you can call it the 1, 6, 7 or whichever, which is the same thing, right? Basically what this is a really great comment. Actually, I think I made this comment bigger. Oh no, I just make myself smaller. That's strange. Never mind. Thanks for that, StreamYard. What a feature that nobody wanted. Anyway, I digress. Very cool comment from Sacred Godslayer. This leads us to the heavy metal chord progression. The chord progression in heavy metal, which is this. It is some iteration of, in the minor key, 1, flat 6, flat 7. Some version of that. That's Rainbow in the Dark. What key is Rainbow in the Dark in? Is it A? Where's the melody? That chord progression, brilliant. I had to think about the melody there, right? But even still, where's Paul Gilbert when you need him? He did a whole album of Dio songs with just the melodies on the guitar. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? Check this out. If we include a G chord into the mix here, we're playing an E minor, C, D. If we pop a G chord in here, maybe, for example, we play E minor, C, G, D. Well, would you look at that? It's the 4 chords of the apocalypse in G. It's 6, 4, 1, 5. And it's Poison by Alice Cooper. The Iron Maiden thing, the heavy metal thing, same thing, but without the 1 chord. But we can express this as being minor key derived. Minor key derived. Where we have 1, which is minor, flat 6, which is major, flat 7, which is major. Some version of this, if you wish to make this the sound of Instagram guitar, the sound of all these guys pretending to be Polyphia, you do this. You play 1 minor, 6 major, and then you play 5 dominant. And you do all the bleepy bloopy stuff on the top, all the crazy tappy things that I can't do. But you can imagine that sequence with all that you get the drill. It's a lot of that. This is something that kind of tickles me with a lot of these very inventive guitar players that you see, is that they're very, very inventive, apart from when it comes to the chords. It's the same blimmin' chords over and over again. It's E minor, C, and B7. If you want to be extra spooky with this stuff, let's say you want that slightly spooky sound, make the C a dominant chord. And then just tap it and slide all over the place, and that's what you got. I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is. I can't do it. I don't know how to do that stuff. Maybe I should learn one day. Truthfully, I think with that side of playing, there is so much composition that goes into it. I think it's a very difficult thing to improvise. And as someone like myself, who's primarily an improviser, I just don't think I have the patience to sit down and learn that stuff, or the patience to sit down and compose that stuff. That is the interesting thing. I guess it's a difference in mindset, and I've explored this with students who are really great at this stuff, but it's largely composed. I'm like, that's fascinating because it's cool. I mean, the playing is very cool. I'm really being a bit dismissive about it. I don't mean to be. I think that stuff's great, but that is the center of the chords. Incidentally, by the way, if you play those chords just like this. In a different key, it's Smooth by Santana. Whatever that is. Last 7 inches from the midday sun. It's, every time I hear it, I'm like, it's Rob Thomas. Where is Rob Thomas when we need all the tapping stuff? Anyway, kind of getting a little bit off piece there, but that is sort of where that goes. Now, There are other chord progressions, several that we haven't mentioned. One that is also really important that we didn't quite get to is the line cliche. And the line cliche is this, very quickly. The line cliche is E minor, it's usually minor, E minor, B7, D major, A7, C major, something happens from there. Nobody kind of agrees on where it goes from here. It could be the Hotel California. Can't remember exactly the exact voicings here, but you get the drill. The thing with the line cliche is the way it works is there's some thread that moves by semitones. Usually what's happening is we're taking this melody and looking for ways to harmonize it. We put it on the root of the 1 chord. We put it on the 3rd of the 5 chord. We put it on the root of the flat 7 chord. We put it on the 3rd of the 4 major, which would normally be minor, but we're playing major because that's the note it gives us. We put it on the root of this chord. We put it on the 3rd of the G. And then we'd make a little skip down here. And then we bring it back up here. Line cliches. We'll do a whole thing on line cliches one day, but that's kind of where we're going at with this. Kind of a response audio with an interesting one here saying, same as many of the tapping, slapping acoustic players, it all sounds rhythmically more complex, but not harmonically unique. 100%. Like, agree with that. Hard agree with that. But I guess with this, here's an interesting, I guess the thought, a corollary on this, kind of a rethinking of this kind of business is how many things can be complex in a piece of music before it breaks. If you have something that is like hugely harmonically complex, and then something that is also hugely rhythmically and texturally complex and melodically complex, how long before there's nothing that we can hold on to with our brain? An example I think about this all the time is clapping Bach. So Bach, beautiful harmonies, melodies, unreal, incredible, like, you know, and everything we do, we owe so much to guys like Bach, as if there were guys like Bach, but you get the gist, right? But if you clap Bach, what you end up with is something like this. Not known for his rhythmic complexity, let's say. Harmonic, melodic, absolutely. So I think this is part of it. I think when you introduce all of this harmonic complexity, introduce all of this rhythmic and melodic complexity with this tappy, slappy acoustic stuff and this modern Instagram style of playing, if the harmony's too complex, it all just sounds a bit, it's hard for our brains to latch onto. It's good to have something that is at least reasonably familiar for the dear listener. Friends, we're running out of time, so we're going to take some questions. Now, don't forget, this is not our final stream on this topic. Not the final stream. We've got one more stream on this. And in our next stream, we'll be building on this and showing you how you can construct more interesting chord progressions. Chord progressions that take advantage of your knowledge of standard chord progressions, but then applying some subtle changes, some chord substitutions, some little movements. This is where we'll talk about secondary dominance. We'll talk about all this sort of stuff to make your chord progressions more interesting. We'll be talking about that next week, but we have got some questions. So I'm going to get through a few of these as we can. Here's a great one from Nick Jennison. The complexity barrier is flexible. Absolutely it is. And I think it's also audience dependent. So you could argue that maybe some musical genres have a less tolerance for complexity than others. Maybe you can argue that rock music is not designed to be super harmonically complex, to which I would see that and I would raise you Thin Lizzy. Because there's a lot of very cool harmony going on in Phil Lynnett's oeuvre. Great word. Not least of which is this chord, this bonkers chord that comes out of nowhere in Boys Are Back in Town. This, you know where I'm going with this. Oop. This one. What is that? It's a very cool chord is what it is. Also, the Carole King chord is in there, which is so freaking cool. So, yeah, it depends, man. There are different barriers to complexity. Some styles of music, you just don't really want that harmonically. Maybe you want it rhythmically. Maybe you want it somewhere else. We could argue that country music is usually very harmonically simplistic, but is also usually very rhythmically complex, especially when it comes to the solos. And also, there's complexity in the lyrics often. We get, you know, there's a lot of... people dog on country for the lyrics being like beer, truck, tailgate, Saturday night, all that stuff. Bro country, yes, but there's a lot of very profound country in there, for example. Anyway, some more stuff very quickly. I'm going to highlight some of these. We've got some really great observations from a new commenter who I haven't quite had a second to... Oh, not new commenter, an existing commenter. I apologise. From my friend Nick's Corsair S1 Tips with some very cool harmonic observations. I just wanted to highlight this very quickly. Just wanted to highlight those because these are some really great observations. I encourage you to go read these at your leisure. Now, here's a question we're going to answer very quickly here, which is from a man with no username. I only say man because it sounds like a Western. You could be a person of any gender with no username, but whoever you are, you got no username, I don't think, or it's a tiny little dot on my screen. Regardless, person with no username has asked the question, very good question, can you expand on how to use an altered scale on the 5th chord? Side tip regarding odd tones in a progression like 2-5-1. Yes, so very quickly, here's the deal. The 5 chord, mega tense. It's a very tense sound. When it's tense, if we are setting ourselves up to pay this tension off by going to a 1 chord, we can make this an altered chord. It only really works when we go to the 1 chord, otherwise we build up all this tension, then don't pay it off. But if we build up all this tension by turning this into an altered chord, what we do is we take our 7 chord, in this case it's a B dominant 7, and we include any combination of the following: flat 5, sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 9. So we could play dominant chord with a sharp 5, a dominant chord with a flat 5, dominant chord with a flat 9, dominant chord with a sharp 9, a dominant chord with a sharp 5 and a flat 9. That's a personal favourite. A dominant chord with a flat 5, or can I even finger this? A flat 5 and a sharp 9, that's going to be a challenge. You could, I don't think I ever have. I don't think I can either. What a... I guess I could just play this. That works. Any combination of those. So flat 5, sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 9. Any combination of them on your 5 chord, provided you're going to pay it off to the 1 chord. Either major or minor. They both work. Now these notes, the notes of 1, flat 7, and major 3rd, combined with flat 5, sharp 5, flat 9 and sharp 9, spell out the altered scale. That's why it works, because the altered scale is literally an arpeggio of an altered dominant chord with all of the possible extensions in. That's why that works. And it works in context because it is maximally tense, and we can play as much tension on that as we possibly can. Folks, we've run out of time again, but we're coming back at this next week. So if you're not subscribed, don't forget to hit the subscribe bell, because we're going to be talking about more interesting chord progressions next week. So if you missed last week's stream on chord construction, definitely worth your time to go and get it. This stream has been on common chord progressions, lots of them. There's a lot to take in here, so don't forget that you can catch these streams on the replay. We're going to leave them up for a while. These streams won't be up forever on YouTube, should point that out, by the way, but they are going to be up for a while. So if you want to go back and check this out, you can go and check it out at your leisure. Next week we'll be covering some more interesting chord progressions like the one I'm about to play over, which is the Joe Bonamassa chord progression, Joe Bonamassa backtrack. If you want to play along with this one, it's in E for the most part, but it moves to A. Progression is as follows. Very interesting progression, I think. It goes E minor. It's a blues riff. With blues stuff. It's E blues. But then it goes A minor. And it is actually in A minor for a second. G. F sharp. What is it? F sharp 7 out of 11. The Alex Lifeson chord. F Lydian. And I'm playing over that F sharp Alex Lifeson. I'm actually playing, depending on how you refer to it, mixed Lydian flat 6, or I'm playing, you can play lots of chords over it. I like mixed Lydian flat 6 over this. So B melodic minor, that's Lydian. And then we have a line cliche in E. And then a shift to B7, which is B Phrygian dominant. You can use E harmonic minor over the top. That's the chord progression. I'm going to take a stab at it, and I will see you guys on stream next week. Let's go. Oh, I've turned it down. Let's bring it up. Let's bring that up a little bit hotter. Here we go. Fell off the fretboard there.